Hi dear friends, in this video I'm going to talk about how to test REST API endpoint to create AI agent in Oracle Fusion AI Agent Studio. So most of the consultants, particularly the functional consultants, are new to the concept of REST API because it's a bit technical. So let me first explain you what exactly is a REST API, what exactly is the meaning of REST, and then we will understand how to go about creating a new agent based on REST API, how to go about testing it prior to creation of agent and so on. So let's start with the basics. So here I've noted down few details. So what is a REST API? So a REST API is an application programming interface that conforms to the design principles of representational state transfer, which is in short called as REST, representational state transfer architectural style, which is a style used to connect distributed hypermedia systems. In other words, multiple systems can be connected using REST API. So how do REST API really works? So REST API communicate through HTTP requests to perform standard database functions like creating, reading, updating, and deleting these records, also called as CRUD within a resource. So just like SQL statement, like you can use SQL DML statements for creating a new record or updating an existing record or deleting a specific record or more than one records or reading records. Just like SQL, here in REST, you use different mechanisms uh, for creating, reading, updating, and deleting a record within a resource. For example, a REST API would use a GET request to retrieve a record, a POST request to create a new record. So, two different aspects of REST API, one is GET and one is POST. Then a PIC request updates a record and a delete request deletes one. So, quite similar to SQL. All HTTP methods can be used in API calls. So, basically, this explains in gist what exactly is REST and how a REST API works. So within Oracle Fusion applications, Oracle has provided what you call as REST API endpoints for different transactional process flows and different base setup related processes. For example, transactional process flow could include creating requisition, updating requisition, or creating purchase order, updating purchase order, or fetching requisition records, or fetching purchase order records, and so on. Or setup data could include um, creating suppliers or maybe getting the supplier records, getting approved supplier records, and so on. So I'm going to demonstrate this to you as a part of this particular lesson as to how to go about testing them. For example, getting purchase order records via REST endpoints and so on. So I've been using this word called as endpoint here. So what exactly is an endpoint and what exactly does it do? So as you could see, an endpoint in REST API, you can think of endpoint as doors to the API. An endpoint is specific to a URL, which is a uniform resource locator, or a URI, which is uniform resource identifier through which the API is accessed. So API is accessed via a URL you provide, and each endpoint is like a special website address that you use to talk to the API. Each one can represent a unique function or resource offered by the API. So basically, in Fusion, it will contain the combination of the server name plus the endpoint. So the endpoint, Oracle has provided a manual under which you can locate that endpoint and then append it using the Fusion base server URL. So with both, it forms a complete URL using which you can use a valid username and password and perform REST API calls to get the data, in other words, to retrieve the data, to post the data, in other words, to create the data, put the data, in other words, to update the data, and finally delete the data, in other words, removing data. Okay, so that four different types of REST API calls you can make it, and this REST API endpoints can be leveraged while creating Oracle Fusion AI agents. For example, you may want to create an AI agent to find out the approved supplier list, or maybe to find out a specific purchase order. What is its status? What is its life cycle at this point of time? For example, the PO has been approved and it has been received but not yet paid, or a PO is received invoice but not yet paid. So this details can be had via the REST API endpoint, and so on and so forth. Okay, so after understanding the basics of REST API, let's move on further. So here you see I have listed down certain business scenarios through which we can test the REST endpoints, and these endpoints we will use it via the documentation provided by Oracle in Oracle Fusion REST API manual for procurement. Okay, so here you have like purchasing, you've got get all purchase order endpoint, and then there's an endpoint for get a single purchase order. Then you can get the lifecycle details of one purchase order. In other words, you would know where the purchase order stands at any point of time. For example, purchase order has been approved, it has been received but not yet invoiced or paid. Likewise, you can get invoice detail for all schedules of a purchase order. So each purchase order will have schedules, then shipments and distribution. So each of the schedules or has been invoiced or not, whether invoiced, what is the status, and so on. And then as a part of the base setup, you can get a list of all procurement agents. So something like buyers, you can get the details of the buyers and so on. And we will also see in terms of supplier management how to go about getting approved supplier list via a REST API endpoint call in Fusion applications database. So let's get started. Now, even before we get started, I'm going to take you to Fusion instance and I'm going to tell you where exactly you can leverage the REST API endpoints to create Fusion AI agents. So let's jump on to Fusion instance. So here I'm logged into Oracle Fusion Cloud, and I'm in the Oracle Fusion AI Agent Studio interface. And in terms of the release and version, if I go here and if I click on about this application, basically I'm on release 13 with a version of 25D, which is displayed over here. So I'm going to close this. So now coming to the REST API, how you can leverage REST API and where you can use it in Oracle Fusion AI Agent Studio. So first place is you can go via the tools. In tools, if you click on a new tool by clicking on add, and here you can choose tool type as external REST. Tool name, give some tool name, say PO test, and then tool code will generate automatically. You choose a family, say PRC, choose a product, purchasing, and optionally give some description, and then come over here in the bottom and click on the add button. Here is the place wherein you add the instance details, the authorization, basic authorization, wherein you provide the username and password. Okay, and then come the function. In function, you click on add, and this is where you provide more details, say get PO details. And you see, as I explained you a little while ago, there are different kinds of REST interfaces or REST in which you can either get the data or post the data or patch, or in other words update the data. Okay, it doesn't have the option to delete it. So you choose HTTP GET, and here you give the resource path, in other words the complete path of the server including the endpoint, and then give a description. and optionally you add the parameters and then hit the add button to create this resource. So that is one place you use the REST API. The second place you use the REST API in Oracle Fusion AI Agent Studio is in Business Object. So if you go into Business Object, click on Add button and choose a family, say Purchasing family, and choose a product purchasing. Give some name and resource type. Say I will say monolith resource, and then come down and click on plus icon to create a new business object function. And out here you give some business object function name, description, operation type as HTTP GET. And here in resource path, you mention the endpoint. Okay, so and then comes the endpoint URL, you have to mention it over here, and then comes the parameters. So you add the parameters and then optionally add the example usages. So this is the second place wherein you can use the REST API in Oracle Fusion AI Agent Studio. So I'm going to cancel this out and I will shortly show you how to go about using these two places. In other words, business objects and tools to create a new AI agent. So you first create a business object and then you create a new tool, attach the business object in the tool, and then you create a worker agent here, and then you create agent team, and within that you create a supervisor agent, and then within supervisor agent you basically add this agent along with the tool and business object that you created. So that would ready out your agent based on a business object, which is, in other words, based on REST API. And if you don't want to use business object, you can directly use tools, and I have shown you how you can leverage REST API within tools. And that tool you attach to a worker agent, and then you create a new team. Within team, you have a supervisor agent, then you call in or you add this agent with an attachment uh, in the tool, and within tool, you will have the REST API call. Okay, so that's at a high level. Okay, I will go into the details a little while later, but what I really want to show you here is the exact way of testing the REST API, because if you start creating a REST API within business object or a tool, and if you don't know whether it's working or not, how would you rely on that? So you've got to first make sure your REST API call is working. So let's go back to my presentation. So we'll first test the REST API endpoint to get all the purchase orders. So for that, I'm going to go into Fusion application documentation. Let me jump there. So first you navigate to docs.oracle.com, and when you type in, you will reach this page. And within cloud applications, you click on see all. So basically, I want to go into the REST API manual for procurement. Alternatively, if you're a financial person and want to explore financial related REST API, you can go in here in financials. And then within financials, you go to API and schema. And within that, as you could see, REST API for Oracle Fusion Cloud Financials. Click on that and you will reach a manual for financials. Likewise, I'm going to go in. See, you've got everything out here. Expense airfare policies, and you have the endpoints out here. Can you see that? This is the endpoint, and with to this URL, you've got to basically prefix your base server URL. Okay, so that holds good for your procurement related endpoints as well. So our first business scenario is to get all the purchase order related details. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to look for the purchasing guide for REST API. So let's go back more. And here I'm going to click on see all. And then I'm going to click on procurement. And within procurement, I'm going to click on API and schema. And then here, I will click on REST API for Oracle Fusion Cloud Procurement. Okay, and here you have got the various cases. So I look for purchase orders. So simply scroll down So here you have purchase orders. So expand that, and then you see you've got get all purchase order is the first one. From this one, you see here get all purchase order is out here. So you click on this one, and as you could see, here is the endpoint to get all the purchase orders. So what you have to do is this endpoint you have to take and append it with your server URL. So I'm going to do that in my notepad. So I have done that. I have appended the URL with my server URL, and then I will go to app called as Postman app. So if you don't have an account, you can simply sign up, and it's free to sign up. So I'm going to go to home. So this is how it looks like when you first sign up on this one. And then I will simply go to say Kabeer's team workplace. So you can create your own team by your own name. Once you do that, it will take you to a place like this, wherein you can specify your REST API calls. So I'm going to clear this off. And I will also take off this one. Okay, and here I'm going to give a call like this. Okay, and it has got all the details of the server, including the endpoint. And once you have this, then you have to go to auth. Auth stands for authorization, and here you have to choose out of these auths, you have to choose basic auth, and then you have to give the username and password. Once you do that, then you click on the send button, and whatever data is fetched from Oracle Fusion Applications Cloud Database for purchasing, that will be displayed at the bottom out here. Okay, can you see that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply copy this, okay, and I will paste it on the notepad. So I'm going to go back to notepad. So I pasted the details of this in my notepad. So basically this user Tiffany Irving has got access to US1 legal entity, and she's a buyer. So the details of all purchase order in relation to US1 legal entity will be pulled up. Okay, and as you could see at the bottom, the total lines that have been pulled up are over 7,000. So basically one PO have got many lines, hence so many lines out there. But it could be millions of lines if you are in a real production database. So don't worry about that. But why I am showing you this is basically the data set will contain a lot of information. Okay, and you can filter that out. For example, you want to see details of only one purchase order. So here you note down PO header ID. That is what is important. So Oracle has provided another endpoint you can leverage to get details of only one PO. Okay. So we'll take for that we need to have the PO header ID. So I'm going to go back to the Oracle manual for API. So I'm going to jump here. Okay. And that is for get all purchase orders. Okay. And then if you see here, you've got get one purchase order. Okay, and you see at the end of the endpoint here you have to give the purchase order header ID, and that is the reason why I was showing you the data set that you've got to get the POID from there and append it endpoint with the POID. So I'm going to copy this whole thing and I will append it with the POID and then I will show you. Okay, so what I'll do is now I will jump to Postman app. So I have appended the URL according to this particular endpoint and added the PO header ID at the end. Okay, and then I will go here and then I will once again remove this URL and add the appended URL. So as you could see at the end, I have got an ID of 560,869. Okay, once I reach here, I'll click on the send button and let's say one thing. I want to clear this off. Okay, never mind. So let's run the query again because here you've got so many lines out here, and I will simply run it again. I will hit the send button. And you see, this time I get the data but that data is limited. So I'm going to copy that and paste it in my notepad, and then I will take you there. So as you could see now, this time it has fetched only 283 lines, and that is associated with just one purchase order. So this is how you go about fetching just one single purchase order. So now let's go back to our presentation and let's check out the third scenario. So the third scenario is get lifecycle details of one purchase order. So to understand what is the endpoint, we need to go back to Oracle documentation for REST API. Let's go there. So here I am in the documentation. So I think I have to look at above section. So here you have got purchase order lifecycle details section. So I'm going to expand that, and then not lifecycle details for one purchase order. So click on that one. Okay, and the endpoint is here. So you've got to take this endpoint and append it with the PO header ID, just as we have done it in the last scenario for getting details of one purchase order. So I'm going to do that. The first time I have used this particular endpoint to get the lifecycle details of one purchase order. So let's go to Postman app, and here I'm going to take off this particular URL and paste the new URL like this. Okay, and then hit the send button again, and this time I'm going to get the lifecycle details of one purchase order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply come here and copy that, and I'll paste it onto notepad, and then I will show you how it looks like. Okay, so here are the details. As you could see at the bottom, total number of lines fetched are 50. So that is for one purchase order, and as you could see, the details are PO header ID, the order number, what amount is this much, delivered amount is also this much, in receiving amount is null, in transit amount is null, paid amount is this much. So this purchase order is complete and closed. No more outstanding items or no more outstanding things to be done in this particular purchase order. Okay, so this is nothing but the details of the life cycle. Okay, all other details are for reference only, so you don't have to worry about that unless you want to see those details as well. Okay, so that covers our next scenario. So I'm going to go back to our presentation, and you see the fourth scenario is get invoice details for all schedules of a purchase order. So for this one, to get the endpoint, we need to go back to the documentation. So I'm going to go back. So here I'm back in the REST API for procurement. So let's expand this one, purchase order schedules. You have to check. Here you have purchase order lifecycle details and schedules. Get schedule detail of for all schedules of a purchase order. The details of one purchase order, and here you have invoices. Get invoice details for all schedules of a purchase order. So that's what we were looking for, and here it's got the endpoint. So copy the endpoint, and here notice that you have to provide the purchase order details in this curly braces. So PO header ID, you have to provide it over here. Okay, so I'm going to copy this one onto my notepad, and then I will complete this URL, and then we'll run it in Postman app. So I've readied the whole URL, and I'm going to go into Postman app. I'm going to clear this particular URL now. I'm going to give the new URL and hit the send button. As you could see, I've given the PO header ID over here, and then I will hit the send button. So that will give me the invoice details of all the schedules. So I'm going to copy this and then paste it onto notepad, and then look at the data fetched. So as you could see, it's just fetched all the information. Here you have got the PO header ID, and line number 2, and then line location and schedule number 1, and then you see here you've got the invoice ID associated with this schedule, the invoice number, it's evaluated receipt settlement invoice, invoice date, invoice status code, invoice status is paid. Okay, and as you could see, a total of 116 lines have been fetched. So this is for line number 2. Likewise, you will have line number 1 and schedule 1. Okay, so all the schedules will be pulled up and their associated invoice details will be pulled up and shown over here. So this basically concludes our scenario number 4 for getting the invoice details for all schedules of a purchase order. Now going to the scenario number 5, which is get details of all the procurement agents. So basically this is something like a setup related task, and your end user may want to have a look at that, or maybe your super user want to have a look at that. So for that, Oracle has provided a REST API endpoint. So let's go back to the documentation to check this one out. So to check the procurement agent, so I think you've got to scroll up, and here you see you've got procurement agents. So if you expand that, here you have get all procurement agents and the associated endpoint. So you have got to basically copy this thing and append it with the base URL of the server to get the details of all the procurement agents. So I have the URL now. So let's go to Postman app now, and I'm going to take off this particular URL completely, and then I will paste the new URL for procurement agents, and then I'm going to hit the send button. So here I will get a different kind of a data. As you could see here, you got assignment ID, agent ID, and so on, and associated procurement BU. So I'm going to copy all this and paste it on a notepad and then analyze. So as you could see, you got the assignment ID, the agent name, the agent ID, agent email, procurement BU, what is the procurement BU, and you see this agent details are not only limited to US1 business unit, but all the business unit that a user have got access to, which could also be apart from US, it could be France, Belgium, UK, and so on. So you'll have all that information of procurement agent out here. So you can see status is active. So this is crucial information that someone wants to see. Maybe it could be a procurement manager. They want to see the agent list. And if someone has left, maybe via the AI agent, they want to simply disable that particular person procurement agent details. Uh, so that could be one scenario. Likewise, there could be multiple scenarios, based on your business requirement. I'm just showing you a way to fetch the data via the REST API endpoint. So that basically covers our next business scenario. So the last one is in relation to supplier management, get approved supplier list. So let's go back to Oracle documentation for procurement REST API. So here I am, and let's look for the supplier related data. You see here suppliers, and then within that get all suppliers, get one supplier, and you should also have approved supplier list somewhere. Let me just find out. So here you have it, approved supplier list source document. So you click on this one, and you see get all approved supplier list source. So basically this scenario or this endpoint, you can use it to update a approved supplier list. So here you have update one approved supplier list source document. So for example, a supplier is not in compliance with the agreed terms and conditions, so you can remove that supplier from the approved supplier list. So to do that, you can leverage this update one approved supplier list source document to do that. Okay, so at this time, let me show you how you can go about leveraging this endpoint to get the list of all approved suppliers. So let me go there, and I'm going to first append this URL and add the server URL to it, and then we'll run it in Postman app. So I've updated the URL with the base URL of the server. I'm going to go back to the Postman app and I'm gonna take off the previously run scenario and then run this one again. And you see I've got the list of approved suppliers, so I'm going to copy this whole data set from the result section, and then I will show you the details on a notepad. So as you could see in the approved supplier list, it's got the BU ID, what is a BU, US1 business unit, what is the ship to org, and what is the ship to organization name, it is Chicago, and what is the supplier name, it is Midtown Computer Supplies, and supplier site is MCS US1, and so on. You see it's got many other details such as the agreement details, etc., uh, associated with the supplier. So every approved supplier may or may not have a blanket purchase agreement associated with it, so that next time you create a requisition, automatically it creates a blanket purchase release from the blanket purchase agreement based on the agreed upon prices and terms and conditions. So basically, this completes all our 6 business scenario of testing out the endpoints. And the next video would be leveraging this endpoint to create a AI agent within Oracle Fusion applications, either using the business object or using the tool. Let's go there once again to have a quick recap. So now that you understood the process, you will understand in a better way if you go back to Oracle Fusion AI Agent Studio and go into Business Object. Then you click on Add. This time you will understand in a better way. So here I'm going to choose the family and product. Then I'm going to give a name. Okay, and then I will choose a resource type. Resource path has come automatically, but here you see, for example, to get approved supplier list, if you go back to the endpoint, you need to append that URL with this. Okay, so let me do that for you. Let's go back to Fusion applications. And here I am, and all you have to do is append it like this over here. Okay, and then you add the business object. Okay, you give some name and give the operation type as get. Okay, and that's it. There are no parameters which are required for this one. And if it was a specific PO, then you have got to give the parameters, or maybe make it such that numbers, alphabets. Anyway, basically you've got to give a name, but this is how you give the business object, and then you save it. And likewise, you define a tool and attach the business object there. Then the rest of the workflow will follow, wherein you've got to create a worker agent, then agent team, within the agent team, supervisor agent, then attach the worker agent, and then you can test it out. And that's with the business object. And again, you can also leverage. So let me cancel this out, and you can leverage the concept of REST API in tools as well. So if I go to tools, I'm going to cancel this one. And here I am in tools, and within tools I can add, and then tool type I can use it as an external REST, give some tool name, okay, and choose a family, choose a product, okay, and come to authorization, give authorization details just as we have given in Postman tool, and then here you add the functions. So HTTP GET, here you have to add the resource path. That resource path has to be the endpoint, okay. So if I go back, so you've got to copy this whole thing like this and paste it there in resource path, paste it over here like this, and then optionally give some description, and that's it. You click on add, and then it will come to the tool, okay. Again, it's giving there are some naming conventions, so never mind. I think can always add it and do it later, and hit add button. Okay, and here you can see once if I just add the authorization, that create button will be enabled as well. Okay, so anyway, you do that later, but that's the way to go about leveraging REST API in your AI agents. So in the next video, I'm going to show you this complete process of creating a new AI agent using REST API. Thanks for watching.